and we are recording this for all of our STEM students in Madison County Schools at Old Town Middle School, Madison Middle School, Shirley Simmons Middle School, and I'm missing one, Germantown Middle School. Thank you.
Okay.
School here with me also at Velma Jackson High School. And we just got through watching some videos about cryopreservation, and we looked at some of the things you've done with your initiative for Africans in STEM.
Mm-hmm.
Also had your friend Lily and Judy a few weeks ago, another product of Ghana.
Yeah.
But she's on the plastic engineer side, and we have some great questions from the students we're going to get to. But before we talk a little bit about the cryopreservation and why it's so important. Let's hear about your background, because you are the first ever. I've had over 100 people. You are the first ever person from Canada to join us, and that is so
Oh,
cool.
wow. That's awesome.
It is a great province, beautiful area, great people, great country. So would love to hear about your background with University of Toronto, and now starting out of Ottawa, then University of Toronto, and also in Mississauga, great suburb of Toronto. So why don't you tell us a little about your background and how you got into this, because it's a super cool field.
Sure, yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. And it's so great to speak to everyone that's watching. So a little bit about my background. So originally my background is, I'm from Ghana. My parents, they were born there and then they migrated over here to Canada. And I was born on the east coast of Canada, which is Nova Scotia. So that's a small province on the east coast. I was born there. And then later through my life, I moved to Ontario, where I'm currently residing now. How I got into science, I would say that it wasn't intentional at all. I was always interested in science. I think I took an interest because my older sister was very interested in it. And so she kind of paved the way and started doing science courses in high school. And then after that, I just kind of followed suit. But again, I really had no idea what I wanted to do in life. I would bounce between, like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a police officer, and then I think I wanted to be just like a businesswoman. And then eventually in high school, I settled on being a dentist. And I decided on being a dentist just because I had this weird obsession with teeth, and I just thought teeth were very fascinating. But also I was really into health as well. And I just really liked, everything about the human body, about improving people's health. And I didn't want to be a doctor just because of the long hours and the stress. So I thought dentist would be a good mixture of you work in the health field, but also you have a 9 to 5 job, right? You're not like on call all the day. I can still have a family and, spend time with my family and everything like that. So I settled on being a dentist last year in high school, so in grade 12. And then that was the year that I was applying to universities. And so going into university, I decided, okay, what program can I do to enable me to get into dental school? So to get into dental school, typically you have to do an undergrad first. You have to take some prerequisite courses, and then you also need to do a DAT, which is a pre-dental test. And so I prepped myself for all of that. I did the DAT. I scored pretty well on it. My grades were competitive. And near the end of undergrad, I ended up applying to dental school. And so I applied to all the dental schools in Canada, and I didn't get in at all. So this was a big shock to me because everything that I was doing in undergrad was just leading up to trying to get into dental school. So when I realized that I didn't get in, I didn't really have a plan B at all. And so I was stuck, graduated from undergrad. I didn't know what to do. I was working odd jobs here and there. And then I spoke to a family member, and he suggested, well, why don't you do a master's to better yourself and to better your chances of getting into dental school? So I thought about it, I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. And going through university, I always had a passion for chemistry. I was very good in it, and it just kind of clicked to me, and I understood it very well. And so I was like, let me just do a master's in chemistry. So at the master's level, it's a little different from the undergrad level because it's more directed towards research. You have your own independent research project. There's less emphasis on courses and taking tests and exams and everything. It's more just kind of you're researching and you're studying on a specific topic and finding out novel ideas and contributing to the field that you're in. So I started a master's. I liked it. It wasn't bad. again, I didn't really pay much attention to what I was doing because I was still in my head, I'm just doing this for dental school. So like I was just kind of cruising through, doing my research. I enjoyed it and everything. And so again, I prepped myself to apply to dental school, took the DAT again. I did exceptionally well this time. Near the end of my master's, I applied for, this is my third time applying to dental school. And again, didn't get in at all. No interview. Yes, no interview, nothing. So again, imagine like everything that I was doing was just trying to lead up to dental school, and then I just didn't get a positive response. So again, I graduated from my master's, and I was stuck just not knowing what to do because I didn't have a plan B. At that time, I didn't really want to work in my field because, again, I liked research, but it wasn't my passion at that time. So I moved back home. I ended up doing odd jobs here and there. I worked at Starbucks for a long time. And then I went on back on my undergrad campus, which is the University of Ottawa, and I ran into one of my professors that I did research with. So I was chatting with him, and he was asking what I was up to. And so I told him, well, did a master's, and now I'm working at Starbucks. Don't really know what to do with my life. So he just talked to me and said that he had an opening in his lab for a PhD student.
Ooh.
And so I thought about it, and I was like, it was a huge decision to make because PhD is it's a huge commitment. It's 4 to 5 years of your life, right? So I was really thinking, okay, where do I see myself and what do I want to do? Do I want to continue down this route of working at Starbucks and, just kind of going from job to job, not really knowing what I'm going to do? Or should I try, doing this research route, which I do like. It's not my passion, but I don't mind it, and research into something new. So I decided to go down that route and do my PhD. And my PhD was in cryopreservation, just as you said before. And I'll get a little bit into that after. But during my PhD, I would say that it was challenging. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles. You cry every now and then, you fail, you pick yourself up again, you try it again. But the one thing that I did like about it is that it was always interesting to me. And it kind of gave me that push to continue to go and keep on going. And I ended up realizing that what I was doing is actually my passion, and I love it. I love to research. I love to find out new things. I love to be creative with science and see where I can add my knowledge to the field. And so, yeah, 5 years later, I graduated from my PhD, actually just earlier this year. In February, I just defended, or sorry, January, I defended, I finished, and now I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher, which is pretty much just a researcher. I work in a lab, and I am working in the field of medicinal chemistry now.
Yeah, and especially now with COVID worldwide, it's such an important field.
Exactly.
Research that has to be done, not just for COVID, but for cancer, and the Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, CTE. There's so many things of the human body that have to be preserved in order for people to order for people to study them, and it affects so many people. So,
Exactly.
tell us a little bit about more of this cryopreservation and why the chemistry is so important. Because I know our chemistry teacher here at Belmont Jackson would love to hear this, but the STEM work that you do is extremely important, not just for Canada, but for the entire world. So tell us a little bit about that and who all it affects.
Right. So cryopreservation is very important. One example that I can give that's very applicable is that, for example, blood shortages. So I'm sure sometimes you hear either on TV or the radio that there's a blood shortage, across Canada or across the US, and we need more people to give blood. So one of the reasons why, there's blood shortages is because a lot of times when people give blood and they donate their blood, we need to be able to preserve it for a very long time, and especially the rare blood types, right? Because if you have a common blood type and you donate it, then typically it could be used within, the next few weeks or in the next month, and that's fine. But for those rare blood types, sometimes they'll need to be preserved for several months to even a year. Right. Yeah, exactly, because they're less in demand. And so one of the ways to preserve cells and different cell types and also blood for a long period of time is to freeze them to very, very low temperatures. So when I'm talking about low temperatures, I'm talking about minus 80 degrees to even down to minus 196 degrees. And so The reason why we freeze them down is because if you think of a cell, there are many components to a cell, right? There are many proteins that are functioning, different working mechanisms of a cell. And in order to preserve something, it's best to stop the different proteins and everything from functioning, just so that pretty much they don't run out of energy. And so when we preserve for a long time, then that enables, that decreases the metabolic kind of need on the cell. And so the issue with freezing, though, is that when you freeze something, ice forms. That's inevitable. And with ice, it can end up damaging the cell. Right. And so what we do is that we try to make small organic molecules that prevent ice from growing larger. Because if ice crystals are very, very small, then it results in less damage to the cells. But what happens just by a natural mechanism is that when you either freeze the cell down or you increase the temperature, you vary the temperature, ice will grow larger and larger. And the larger that ice grows, the more damage that it pushes on the cell. And so with our organic chemicals that we were making in the lab, we were preventing ice from growing large so that we could preserve the cells for a longer time with less damage.
Yeah, and we just watched a couple short videos on cryopreservation before you got on, but what we could tell is not only is the chemical knowledge important, but you have to know the material you're putting it in, and you have to know how those materials will react to certain types of mammalian cells. Because I'm a novice, but at the end of the day, with you have lives on the line, you have to be at least somewhat skilled in multiple areas of chemistry and science in order to be successful at this.
Yeah, exactly. So just like you said, we have several different cell types in our body, right? And so all of those cell types react differently to pretty much the media that you're going to put the cell in to preserve it. And so what may work for one cell type, like your red blood cells, may not work for example, your cardiac cells, right? Or may not work for your lung cells. So there's also that factor where, we can't just find a universal solution or universal molecule to preserve all the cell types just because they're all different.
Yeah, and along those lines, what is some of the technology that's evolved while you've been doing this?
Some of the technology?
Yes.
Right. So during my PhD, actually, there was a lot of research going into not only freezing cells, but also freezing tissues and organs. And so that's something that is also very important as well, because again, if you need to donate a tissue or donate an organ, you're going to have to be able to preserve it for a long time. Now, when you think of that on a cellular level, tissues are made up of several different types of cells, right? And so remember how I said that with different cell types, they all react differently. So if you have a tissue, all those different cell types in the tissue are going to react differently. And then now think about an organ. An organ is made up of several different types of tissues, which is also made up of several different types of cells. So it's even more complex to freeze an organ versus a tissue versus a cell. Yeah, and so while I was doing my PhD, there was a lot of cool research going into freezing organs and pretty much perfusing or just pushing fluids and cryopreservative fluids into an organ to be able to cool it down to a lower temperature and freeze it and preserve it for a long amount of time.
Yeah, and that could lead to a transplant for someone with a life-threatening cancer or illness. So I didn't think about that either.
Exactly.
That's a lot of lives.
Exactly.
The work that you guys do. Now, and along with the technology, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the software skills that you would have to be skilled in, because on top of the chemistry part, obviously there's a lot of computer things going on this. So how skilled do you have to be on the software edge of this on top of the chemistry side?
So for my research work, we didn't really have to do a lot of software. We didn't really have to have a lot of software skills. We were doing more on the technical level. So more of working in the lab, doing different reactions with chemicals, and then testing whatever we made with the different cell types, right? So it was a mixture of chemistry and also like cellular bio and biochemistry as well. So we didn't actually have to do a lot of technical and software skills. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I will tell you, and again, I'm not a chemistry teacher, but I do know our students love to make fun of our chemistry teachers when they talk about the importance of safety in a science lab. Now, obviously, in your case, it's even more so because, just looking at that stuff, it just looks like it can kill you if it's not handled. So how important is that is that safety in a chemistry lab of any sort for not only the sample, but for the scientists as well?
Yeah, so safety is very important. I was just like them as well. You know, in high school, it's like, who cares? Like, like whatever about safety. But I have experienced things. I've also seen things where it's really important to wear all the different, lab wear that you're supposed to wear. So typically when I'm in the lab, I'm always wearing gloves because I'm touching things, I'm touching chemicals. So I always want to make sure my hands are protected. I'm always wearing goggles. And those are probably, I would say, the most important because you really want to protect your eyes. Say if you're dealing with something and just a little drop of chemical goes in your eye, you never know what's going to happen. That could cause to so many different issues. And then apart from that, also a lab coat. So lab coat's also very important because when you're working in a lab, you don't want to stain your clothes. You could also be working with acid too that can easily burn through your clothes and then burn your body as well. So all of those different safety wear is very, very important when working in chemistry.
Yeah, and like I said, and I was the same way. And I had a chemistry teacher that tried to be so funny, and she said, "Now, if your clothes catch on fire, you're gonna have to get naked in front of the whole class." So,
That's smart.
luckily, that never happened.
Mhm.
Now, before I get to some of these questions, and I do have some really good ones, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. You've been very vocal all over the internet on interviews in the United States, Canada, and Africa as well, talking about the visibility for not for especially women, but especially African immigrants in STEM fields. So, one, what got you into that, and two, why do you think that exposure is so important for African immigrants in North America?
Yeah, so what actually got me into that was my own personal experience. And so I live in Canada, and Canada is supposed to be well, I'm not saying supposed to be, but it is a multicultural country. However, when I got into science, and even at the higher level, I barely saw anyone that looked like me. So, for example, going in my master's, the university that I did my master's in, I was the only Black female in the whole program. And for several years during my PhD as well, I was the only Black female in my program. And so when you don't see a lot of people that look like you start to feel like, okay, well, am I supposed to be here? Because why am I the only one here? Right. And so think about like battling all of that, plus the stress of school, plus, all the work that you have to do is just very mentally tasking. And you start to develop something called imposter syndrome. So I don't know if you guys have talked about imposter syndrome before, but that's pretty much just thinking that you're an imposter in a place that you're supposed to be in, right? So thinking that you don't belong to this place just because you don't see a lot of people that look like you. So with me going through, education and noticing that I was the only one, I always wish that I had someone that looked like me and someone that I could relate to in my program. And even when I was an undergrad too, having a professor, that was Black, I never did. And I feel like if I did have a professor that was Black, then I would know more about the possibilities of going into research, of being in academia, of being a professor. But that never crossed my mind because I didn't see anyone like that. And so with all of that, I really didn't want, the generation behind me to go through the same thing, which is why I'm very vocal about, just pushing more minorities and more women minorities as well to go into STEM, to be the faces for the people that, are coming up. And also just to show them that it can be done. Like there are so many different possibilities out there in STEM. It's not a very tough subject that's only just for a specific group of people, but it's for everyone. And just because we all come from diverse backgrounds, being in STEM, we need diversity because STEM is a field where you're always contributing your ideas. You're always contributing your creativity. And so when you're from a diverse background, the way that you see something is different from the way that someone else that is from a completely different background from you also sees something. And so that's why I really value diversity in STEM, and I think it's really needed.
Yeah. And unfortunately in Canada, I'm not 100% sure. So if I'm wrong, correct me. United States, we have the HBCUs, which are the historically Black colleges and universities, where they are majority Black, a majority Black faculty. So if you'd have had that opportunity in Canada, do you think that's something that you would have taken advantage of?
Definitely. We don't have universities like that in Canada, but I have spoken to some girls that actually went to HBCUs. And their experience just always blows my mind, having all of your professors that are Black. Like I couldn't even imagine that because I didn't even have one professor that was Black. And so I know that, the women that did go to HBCUs really benefited from it. And so hands down, I would have gone to one if I had the opportunity.
Yeah, and those STEM programs at HBCUs have gotten a lot of grant money here to have more research. Earlier this year we had a STEM professor from Jackson State here in Jackson, and they have a 3D weather simulation lab for meteorology students in Jackson State, and it's the only one in the United States.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty incredible to hear about it. So there are opportunities that I think our kids need to realize that other people like yourself never got.
Yes.
And even though you are in a big international city, there are not as many opportunities. Now, I do have some questions here, and I think you've inspired a couple of these young people because they're asking about some of the things you talked about.
Sure.
But, while you were talking, but this is from Amaya Dixon, and she's in ninth grade, and she asked, during the times you doubted yourself during the times you doubted yourself about going into your career, what kept you going and motivated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me just say that I still doubt myself, even at this level. I was actually working on something this morning and I was just doubting myself because I was like, I don't know if I can actually do this. So what keeps me going is probably just one thing that I'm really big about is daily affirmations, and just telling myself that I'm more than capable and I am able to do this. And also the fact that I really think that I was strategically placed in this field, because if you look at my story, this wasn't even on my radar, right? I was not even trying to go into STEM as well. So just also thinking that I am here because I'm supposed to be here really also keeps me going as well. So I would say that it's a mixture of just self-motivation and just also faking it till you make it as well.
Yeah, the easiest way to not let people know you don't know what you're talking about is to make them think you know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. It gets you really far.
I'm a pro with that. This is Alonzo Johnson. He's in ninth grade, and he asked, how hard is it to get your footing in a male-dominated field?
That's a really good question as well. So how hard is it? So I would say that first, I would say that these days, I think because there's more awareness, just about, EDI and diversity initiatives and everything, I would say that there are advances being made to try to, incorporate more women into male dominated fields. But, before all of this would happen, I would say that it was difficult. And I would say that it was difficult because of number one, imposter syndrome and just, having the motivation and the courage to actually get yourself into those fields and to continue in those fields, even though you don't see a lot of people that look like you. And also, the little things like the microaggressions, maybe even the harassment and everything that you could face as well. That's also something that is mentally tasking and that is difficult. But I think this kind of goes back to what I said before, telling yourself that you're here because you're supposed to be here, I think is something that will just really help and really keep you along the way.
Absolutely. Now, this is Jaheim Banks. He's also in ninth grade, and he asked, is your job a passion or is it just about the money?
That's actually so funny you asked because lately I've been really thinking like, do I really want to follow my passion or do I just want to go where the money resides, so I would say it's a mixture of both because like I said before, I didn't realize that, research and chemistry was my passion until I was into my PhD. But now I would say that, there are definitely, well, okay, first of all, I would say that, even if I stick with research, there are definitely more lucrative routes that I could take versus more unlucrative routes, right? And so I think that whatever field that you're in, there's always going to be one path that, will take you to where all the money is, and another path which will just keep your passion alive, but also maybe not benefit you as much cost-wise. But the one thing that I've realized just kind of as I've gotten older and gone through all these experiences, is just to do what makes you happy, and yes, you can always find a job that will compensate you well and everything, but if you're not happy in that job, it's really not going to do much for you. So I would say try to find an easy balance where you can benefit financially, and also, fulfill your passion and do what makes you happy.
Yeah, and I'm living proof of that. I was making really good money in a field I hated, and to me, it wasn't worth it. I actually changed careers at 30, and and I agree 100% on finding on the passion of something you're happy with, because I don't care how much money you're making, you can still be miserable.
Exactly.
Now this is Zarius Cooper. He's in 9th grade, and he asked, this is interesting. He said, "Has your job brought you to see anything interesting that an average person would not see?"
Hmm. Um, hmm. An average person. Well, I mean, every day I would say I'm looking at things that the average person has not seen, because I'm doing a lot of chemical reactions, right? And so with chemical reactions, you're mixing one chemical to the other. So I remember actually there was one incident that was kind of scary. And so this is why you should always follow a protocol, okay? You're never too smart to not follow a protocol, and you're never too smart to read about the chemical that you're using. So this was back in my master's, where I was starting off in research and I was adding different chemicals together. However, with these specific chemicals, the order of addition is important. So you have to add one before the other. But I did it the other way around. And so what happened was that when I added the second chemical in, there was like a flame that just went through my flask, like, and it was very, very quick. But like if my hand was there, I would have gotten burned. So thank God my hand was, a little further away, but it just made like an instant flame, like boom. And then, yeah, it was very scary. So,
You hear all the jokes about blowing up a chemistry lab, but it could actually.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it can.
Now this is Brian McMurtry. He's in 11th grade, and he asked, "Is there any room for failure, or do you have to be perfect every time?"
Oh, there's always room for failure. I fail every day. And the thing about research too is that you really have to know how to pivot and pick yourself up. Yeah. Because, for example, yesterday, prime example, I was doing an experiment. I spent 3 hours of my life, okay, on that experiment, 3 hours. And at the end of the experiment, it didn't work. So that's 3 hours of my life just gone. I could never get it back, And at first I was like, oh, okay, I wasted so much time and I have so much other things to do. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? That's research. That's the way it is. Sometimes you'll spend a whole day doing something and then it won't work. So you need to pick yourself up, reevaluate, pivot, and then try something else. So, failure is inevitable when it comes to research. I think it's just important to know how to bounce back from it quickly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I ask every STEM speaker the same thing, because the problem, an issue with not just the kids here, but the kids are in this whole generation. If it's not right the first time, they want to quit.
Exactly.
And especially in STEM and any type of research, even on the engineering side, in the manufacturing side, especially on the chemistry side, the trial and error aspect is extremely big. Mm-hmm. So, how often do you actually get it right the first time?
10%. Honestly, not a lot.
Hard to say, but I think it's important for them to realize that when it comes to this type of stuff, you have to depend on your training and the trial and error to fix the problem. That's what researchers and engineers do. They fix problems. Mm-hmm. They don't just figure it out on the first try. They have to use their training and their skills in order to come up with a solution.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is the last question. This is from Reginald Cooper, and he's in 10th grade. And he asked, "How exciting is it knowing that you can possibly save somebody's life?"
Yeah, it's very, very exciting, which is why I wanted to go into this research path, because, there's a lot of things that go into research, and, it's not like a doctor where you're kind of at the forefront of it and you're at the face of saving someone's life. But this is something that you're kind of doing in the background. Like, for example, right now I'm working in medicinal chemistry. So it's a little different from cryopreservation, but essentially we're making drug-like molecules to eventually be drugs on the market. And so this is something that I'm doing at like the beginning stages of, the drug discovery process, but eventually could lead to saving a bunch of people's life, So it's very, I think it's really rewarding, and it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, and I got to get you in contact with my friend in Irvine, California, that does cancer research for Merck. On the research side, I got to get y'all in contact. I think that'd be a great collaboration. But we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, the crazy thing is you're not even in the United States, and you talk about the same issues that young Black kids in the United States face.
Mm-hmm.
So the imposter syndrome is not just a United States thing; it's a worldwide thing. And United States and Canada are not the only places where that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, even if our kids here don't want to be a scientist, even if they don't want to be an engineer, at the end of the day, they're going to have that same situation where they face themselves being the only person, the only female, the only minority in a certain situation.
Mm-hmm.
So what can they do now to prepare themselves for that in order to be successful with someone like you?
Mm-hmm. I would just say, whatever field you're in, just make sure you know your stuff. Like whatever it's going to take you a long way for sure. And the one thing that I found is that the more confident you are in your field, the further that you'll go. So, like I said before, fake it till you make it. Confidence is everything. And just because something is hard, it doesn't mean that it can't be done.
Absolutely.
One thing that I always like to think about is, when you were a child, when you were little and you were first starting to walk, wasn't it hard? We were all struggling, but look at us now. We walk without even thinking about it. So, just because something is hard doesn't mean that it's going to be hard forever. All you have to do is just work at it, and then it won't be hard anymore. So never let, difficulty or the toughness of a subject deter you from, what you like to do or what you want to do.
Well, that is incredible, and it's great to hear. It's great to hear, especially on Women's History Month, to hear such an inspiring story from such a successful woman up there in Canada. And again, we thank you so much for joining us. You're doing some great stuff. You're a great Instagram follow as well. I made sure they have that information so they can see some of the cool stuff you're doing. And again, Dr. Anna Ampaw, all the way in Toronto, Canada, joining us today. And we thank you so much. And have a great day, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.